welcome to the June 9, 2021 City Council Work Session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And thank you again for tuning in. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager for our first topic.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, our first topic is the 1059 Willamette Project, and I'm joined by Ann Fifield and Amanda D'Souza from Planning and Development, who are going to walk us through that presentation.
Get myself unmuted here. Let's see, good afternoon. I'm Ann Fifield. I'm the Economic Strategies Manager in the Planning and Development Department. And I'm here today with Amanda D'Souza to discuss the redevelopment of that former LCC building at 1059 Willamette Street into mixed income housing. Before Amanda goes into the details on this project, I want to provide a little background. Back in December, the City Council had a work session on economic recovery strategies in response to the pandemic's impact on the economy. One of our key conclusions was that downtown has been hit especially hard by the pandemic because it has a concentration of businesses that have had to close to prevent the spread of COVID-19, including restaurants and entertainment venues. Also, there's a good chance that office space will be less full in the next few years as many people choose to continue working remotely, leading to fewer people downtown during regular business hours. One strategy to support the recovery of our downtown is to bring more housing to it. More housing will bring more people to the downtown. I want to first acknowledge Eugene has made good strides in our downtown. We were the primary focus of a recent article in the Washington Post about 20-minute cities and how cities make themselves more walkable through compact development. The article focuses on Eugene's success to be a walkable and bikeable city with diverse services in our downtown. The article reminds us that our investments in the downtown are paying. It is gratifying to get national coverage, but we all know there's a lot of room for improvement in our downtown. And increasing the number of housing units is an essential step to continuing on that positive trajectory. Increasing housing units in the downtown will also help address the long-standing undersupply of housing in Eugene. We shared with you an update on the Housing Tools and Strategies work, how that work has evolved, and staff's plans to develop a housing implementation pipeline, or a HIP. We introduced the idea of a housing continuum that shows how different housing types relate to each other. It also demonstrates that each step of the housing ladder is an important part of the overall system, from temporary shelters all the way to market rate housing. Eugene needs more housing across the housing continuum so that households at all income levels can find housing that doesn't leave them housing cost burdened, which brings us to 1059 Willamette Street. This proposed project includes market rate and income qualified units. The mix of resources that the city has identified to support this project is an innovative approach to increasing our housing supply. It is different from other affordable housing projects we've contributed to, and it would use fewer local and state resources. This site has been vacant since LCC moved to its new building in 2013. There's been no activity in the center of the block in the heart of downtown for 8 years. The proposed project has the potential to increase the supply of moderate income housing. These residents will have a low carbon footprint, will help us meet our climate recovery goals. They'll have easy access to the bus system and can walk to most basic services, including 2 grocery stores. This proposed project will bring people to this underused site, making our downtown more vibrant. So the next time the Washington Post comes to town, we'll have even more things to show them. To Amanda now, and she'll explain the work to date, the proposed redevelopment, and our recommended next steps.
Thanks, Ann. We wanted to first provide some context as to what the mix of housing and housing pipeline look like right now in downtown Eugene. This map shows the over 900 existing market rate and student housing units near 1059 Willamette. After several years of not seeing any new market rate housing, we saw 2 new developments come up last year. Gordon Lofts near the top of the map, and Ferry Street Manor, a 50-unit project not shown here but located just to the east of this map. There is also a little over 400 existing, proposed, and upcoming affordable income qualified units. 2 of these projects, the Nell and Lincoln Street apartments, shown here with a blue outline, are in the proposed and construction phase and would result in the creation of 100 new affordable housing units down the street from 1059 Willamette. The Nell will include 45 units of permanent supportive housing, similar to the Commons on MLK, and Lincoln Street apartments would include 59 units ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms to support families at 30 and 50% AMI. It's also worth noting that just a few blocks outside of this map is the downtown riverfront redevelopment, which has market rate and affordable housing coming up in the pipeline. I'll recap how we got here. We'll start in 2013 when LCC moved to their new building, and the building has been vacant since. In 2016, Council identified the property in the Downtown Urban Renewal Plan as one of 4 projects eligible for urban renewal resources to support its redevelopment. In 2019, we began exploring the possibility of using this site for a housing development. In May of that year, LCC approved the sale of the property to the city. And in January 2020, the Council approved purchase of the building for mixed income housing using $500,000 of federal Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, funds. We closed on the site in April 2020, and in July, Council approved the request for proposals process shown in Attachment C. In September, Council held a public hearing for the project and approved the RFP criteria in Attachment E and a $1.1 million investment package that would be offered with the RFP. Finally, in November, the RFP was released, which I'll touch on next. The request for proposals was open for 3 months and outlined the requirements and the criteria that a proposal must address. This includes that at the basic level, proposals must be for mixed income housing, where at least 51% of the units are affordable to households with 80% of area median income or less. The other 49% could have had any rental rate, and the mixed income housing needed to be maintained for a 20-year affordability period at a minimum. Because the property was acquired using federal funds, the project must also comply with several federal regulations, such as stormwater management, noise management, and historic preservation, and the building must be completed and occupied by 2025. We also asked developers to respond to the specific council-approved criteria. Proposers were asked to describe their experience with affordable housing projects using local and minority and women-owned contractors, using green building measures, and also talk about how they would manage the property, market the units, and provide culturally competent services. As I mentioned, in September, Council and the agency board took action to make $1.1 million available with the RFP for potential public investment. The RFP included suggested uses, and respondents were instructed to specify how the public investment could be used to support their project. And as is customary for land bank sites, the RFP also assumed the property would be given to the selected developer at no cost. Before I start, I'd like to highlight that while we would have liked to have seen more proposals, we're not entirely surprised we received only one. This is a unique, challenging, and complicated project. There are challenges in working with a constrained L-shaped site with a vacant and unmaintained building, and the mixed income housing model is complex. It requires an understanding of both the market rate and affordable housing development realms, including the knowledge of how to navigate federal affordable housing requirements. We believe the proposal we received is a strong one that meets the basic project requirements, and it exceeds several criteria that were outlined in the RFP. The proposal we received was for the Montgomery, submitted by a development team led by DeChase Nixis and Edlin and Company, and includes Raul Broca Architects, Cornerstone Community Housing, and Affinity Property Management. Edlin and Company, an affordable housing developer based out of Portland, has a long history of developing affordable housing at various income levels and has experience with mixed income housing. DeChase Mixis, a developer based in Eugene, recently partnered with both Edlin and Cornerstone on affordable housing projects in Eugene and elsewhere in the Northwest. I'll highlight some of the key features of the proposal, which is included in Attachment A. The team proposes the development of a new $30 million 6-story building with 129 units. This would consist of 66 income qualified units and 63 market rate units. The building would have an active ground floor with below market incubator retail space, community space for tenants, space for local art, and a mural wall. They also propose completion of construction by 2024 in advance of the 2025 occupancy deadline. Cornerstone Community Housing would provide resident services through their Healthy Homes program, which supports interventions and services that promote housing access, retention, and stabilization. In partnership with Women's Space, 10 units would be set aside for victims of domestic violence. The proposal commits to an affordability period for the project would be 35 years, which is more than the required 20-year period. The building would also include cost-effective green building features in order for the project to be certified under the LEED multifamily program. It also includes a number of amenities to support households with pets. And the developer proposed a dual design with 2 different facades. The Willamette side would acknowledge the historic context of the street, and the more modern 11th Avenue facade responds to its location along a high-traffic corridor. The city's urban design team reviewed the proposed design and concluded it incorporates features that would be a vibrant addition to the downtown streetscape, highlighting that the building is designed for the human scale, amplifies the historic context, and interacts with the streetscape with its active ground floor uses. Mixed income housing projects generally face a financial gap due to the limited rental income and inability to access traditional tools available for affordable housing. The city has a mix of tools to support 60% AMI projects, but we have a limited number of tools to support a project with 80% AMI units. The RFP outlined several ways the city could potentially support a mixed income housing project. It assumed the building would be offered at no cost to the developer, which is standard for land bank sites. We purchased the site from LCC last year using $500,000 of CDBG funds, and the building was most recently appraised in 2019 for $680,000, which took into account the demolition and abatement costs. As I mentioned, council and the agency board took action to offer $1.1 million with the RFP to support the project. The proposal requests the use of the funds for system development charges, permits and other fees, and the EWEB downtown electric system connection fee. Should council choose to move forward with the development team, more information on the specific use of these funds would be included as part of proposed terms brought back to council for approval. The development team also stated their intent to apply for a multi-unit property tax exemption, also known as a MUPTE, should it move forward. This would entail the standard MUPTE application process. The project is not eligible for the low-income rental property tax exemption, or LRPT, which requires that all of the units be affordable to 60% AMI households. We also wanted to bring attention to the rents that are included in the proposal and provide additional information for your consideration. Bear with me because it's about to be a lot of numbers and percentages. I'll first start by highlighting that all the households in the income qualified units would have their incomes verified at 80% AMI or less in order to qualify to live there. As with all affordable housing developments, the city would monitor the process to income qualify the residents using the most current CDBG income limits. Both Cornerstone Community Housing and Affinity Property Management have experience verifying income levels. Next, CDBG's policy states that rent and utility costs should be no more than 30% of household income. This is the threshold of affordability. The proposal included rent levels that are 30% of household income for 80% AMI households. The 80% AMI rents shown here were reduced by the utility allowance. This calculation of rent is acceptable under our current land bank policies. The RFP stated that proposals should use HUD fair market rents. These HUD rents are published annually and are determined through a complex methodology using census and local survey data of recently occupied local rentals. The rents are calculated at the 40th percentile of rents calculated through this process, and they're used as rent limits for programs like the rental rehabilitation program. The RFP asked for these rents because they are desirable rent levels for an income qualified project. And the rents shown here are the 2020 HUD fair market rents for studios and 1-bedrooms, though I'll also add that these rents would include the cost of utilities. The developer stated that the proposal would not pencil using HUD fair market rents, but it was viable using the calculation of 80% AMI rents. We asked them what their financial gap would be if they used fair market rents, and they said there were several factors they would need to revisit, but estimated there would be an increased gap of $2 million, meaning the project would need an additional $2 million subsidy to make it pencil. As standard with land bank sites, we convened an evaluation committee to score the proposal based on the approved criteria. The committee included 7 people with external and internal members, and overall the committee felt the proposal was strong and would benefit downtown Eugene, and expressed appreciation for features like pet amenities, attention to inclusivity between residents, and the integration of art into the project. They expressed concerns with the volatility of construction costs and whether projects like this are feasible, but did note this is a very experienced development team who has gotten complicated projects done in the past. To get public feedback on the proposal, the city also released a community survey in March 2021. It was sent to stakeholder groups, shared via social media, and received news coverage with several media outlets. It was open for 3 weeks and received 327 responses. Attachment F includes all of the survey responses, a summary of results, and emails we received about the project through May 24th. To remind you, we previously had several opportunities for community feedback. While exploring the mixed income housing project for the site concept for the site, we conducted outreach to a variety of stakeholders and sought feedback from these groups on the RFP criteria. Council also held a public hearing for the project on September 21st, 2020, seeking comments on whether the project should move forward, if so, how it should be funded, and on the RFP criteria. If Council provides us direction to move forward with this team, here's what the potential next steps could look like. Once you provide direction to enter into exclusive negotiations, staff would begin working with the development team to generate deal points. These deal points would outline expectations and milestones for the project and would outline specific uses of the public funds. We would bring back those deal points to Council for action. And if Council approved those deal points, we would then enter into an agreement with the development team based on the terms, and they would start their due diligence and refinement of the project. The developer would then go through the standard MUPTI application process, which includes further neighborhood engagement opportunities and council consideration. It's after these steps that the project would be ready to begin construction, with completion and occupation no later than 2025. With that, we'll end on the city manager's recommendation and hand it back to you for discussion, and we are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for a very clear and concise discussion of a complicated project, and was very helpful to kind of walk through some of the high points and address some of the issues that we've heard from citizens in the last month since our initially scheduled work session. So I'm opening it up for council comments. Are there questions or need for clarification from council members? Okay, it looks like those all came up so fast. Councilor Syrett, Councilor Groves, and Councilor Keating.
Thanks. I guess I'll start with my questions first, and then if I have time, I'll make comments or get a second round for those. So thank you for the presentation. I am wondering if there's any, knowing that this project plans to apply for a MUPTI and if we go forward with it, with this proposal, do we have any estimate of what that tax deferral might look like? And related to that, what the estimated taxes on the building would be once it's actually developed, regardless, obviously, of the MUFTI?
The development team's pro forma estimated the exemption to be a total of $2 million. So it averages to about $200,000 a year, obviously starting less and increasing by year 10. So I would estimate, I don't know what it would be in year 11. I'm going to see if I can find that. I don't know. Anne, do you have anything?
I'll have to poke around and see if I can find it. I don't have it handy.
Okay, if someone could get that for me. And then do we have an estimate on what its taxable value will be once the site's redeveloped?
No, it doesn't look like, so let's see. I mean, this is in year 20, based on their pro forma, is that the property taxes would be $290,000 in year 20, which is not super helpful, but
seems low. Right now, the property pays 0 in property taxes. Is that correct?
correct, yes.
And has since Lane Community College
At least the 70s, yeah.
owned it. Okay. And then again, assuming a majority of council wants to move forward with this particular proposal, because, so I guess I'll say, I find a lot of things about this proposal that I find recommended to us. I mean, it really is meeting our RFP. We were very deliberate about how we put out what we wanted to see here. We wanted a mixed income building with some publicly subsidized units. That's something we've never been able to do, and we've found ourselves in this unique position due to the funding mechanisms to do that. It helps meet our goal of a housing downtown. And then the other things that I think really recommended to us is that they're proposing to keep the income qualified housing there for 35 years, as opposed to the typical 20 years for most publicly subsidized housing. And I really appreciate their pet-friendly infrastructure and being a pet-friendly building. As someone who rented for the first 15 years I was here in Eugene, a pet owner, it can be really hard to find housing as a person who rents and has a pet as part of their family. And then lastly, I'll say in the past, we've received a lot of people have been very critical of out-of-state developers, that out-of-state developers were somehow bad or evil. My understanding is that one of the members of this development team was born and raised and grew up here in Eugene, developed their business here in Eugene and wants to invest in Eugene. I think that's pretty awesome. So I'm wondering, I would love to see the rents be at the HUD fair housing market rate, and wondering what options we might have for filling that $2 million gap in order to make that happen.
And Councilor, Councilor, sorry. There actually, property taxes will come online in year 1. The value of the land and the commercial element will become taxable. And they've estimated that would be about $165,000 in year 1. And then it will double. It looks like actually it would be about, let's see, $400-ish thousand total coming online in year 11.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have Randy and then Matt and then Emily.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ann and Amanda, for the presentation and the packet. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I thank the review committee, and I like the fact that this is a local developer. And basically, I think Councilor Siret touched on a lot of the comments that I had. I also have a couple of questions based on some of the submissions that we have received as council over the last couple of weeks. Just make sure I'm understanding the mixed income housing with 51% being 80% of AMI. I'm assuming the 80% of AMI, that's all based on meeting the criteria for some of the federal funding, correct? So that's why we set at those numbers and not some different set of numbers.
Correct. So because we use CDBG, funds, yeah, that's what sets that at least 51% of the units need to be at 80% of AMI.
Great. I just want to make sure that our listeners are hearing that as well. So that's I think that's an important point. And then the second question I had is regarding some of the information we've received with concern over the discrepancy between the tax appraisal and market appraisal. I know I've been engaged in a number of real estate deals over the years, and I know that the two do not always line up, but could you explain that a little bit? And I understand part of it is because of the demo, and I'm sure the hazardous materials abatement, i.e. Asbestos, but could you go into just a little bit of detail on how that happens?
Throwing it to Anne.
Throwing one set of glasses off my head to do it. So the real difference is we hired Duncan and Brown, a local appraisal firm, to appraise the property, and they went in and looked at it and determined that the building, essentially the highest and best use is for residential, and the building has no value, and then it will cost money to tear it down. It's not redevelopable in its current structure. The assessor's office has not looked at the building since 1994, I think is the year. And so that was the last time they actually actively looked at the building. And so what they do is every year, the value simply increases in step with other comparable properties across the county, other commercial buildings. And so it's grown at whatever percentage every year over time. The value of the land is rough. They've estimated the value of the land at roughly $900,000 and the building at about $5.9 million. And that's aligned with what the appraisal said. The value of the land is roughly $900,000. It's going to cost money to tear the building down, and the building itself doesn't have value. That's really the difference, is just they haven't been at the building, and they haven't had much of an incentive. The assessor hasn't had an incentive to look at the building because it's not been on the tax rolls, and it's not been a priority to go out and assess a building that doesn't pay taxes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So basically, they aren't getting inside the building like the actual appraiser did, and they are not seeing the decline of the building over years.
That's
okay.
Succinct way to say that.
Well, I just, again, I want to make sure I understand it, but I also want to make sure that the public is understanding that as well. So I think those are really important points. And, I understand just taking the rough numbers into consideration why that might raise some concern, but there's a lot of factors that go into that. So thank you very much for the explanation. And starting with my campaign, I've been for adding more compact housing. So I think this certainly meets the bill on so many levels. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and then Emily.
Thanks, Mayor. Similar to Councilor Groves, I ran on promoting mixed economy, mixed use housing, and this is an exciting historic opportunity, bringing federal and state programs together for an efficient use of resources. I have a couple of questions. One was brought up in the community survey responses that we received. Someone writes, I see no reference to parking. If there isn't sufficient parking for residents and guests, there could be a large negative impact. It's right across the street from the bus station. So it is on a tier 1 transportation line, obviously, the hub of our tier 1 transportation lines. So the first part of my question revolves around the inquiry from the community survey about parking. The second part of the question, do our service providers, either Women's Space or Cornerstone, provide bus passes, and what's the potential for partnership with LTD for the residents who are going to be living at the Montgomery to have access to transportation affordably?
I'm unsure of whether they currently have any programs set up at Cornerstone or Affinity. We're going to be having conversations with LTD just because construction of this building will have impacts on their operations. And so it's a topic we can definitely bring up and explore potential partnerships to serve the population of folks that would be living at the Montgomery. I think the development team expects many of the people who are choosing to live in this urban environment to want to take advantage of the other transportation options like bus and bike and walking. I mean, it's a partnership we can definitely explore.
So great. That's great. Thanks. And recognizing that not everyone though would want to be able to ride the bus. I would want to encourage as many folks as possible. What parking options around the Montgomery exist to be part of this package to prospective tenants?
Yeah, so the team has 20 spots included with their proposal on the ground level underneath the building. It's also across the alley from the Overpark, the city's Overpark garage. And it's also only 3 blocks away from the 13th and Olive development, which has a very underutilized parking garage. And the city already works with them to lease those spaces for public use. So the development team would work with our city parking services to find the solutions that meet their needs.
Got it. Thank you. The pet amenities piece, as Councilor Syrett pointed out, is one that's attractive to me for obvious four-legged Great Dane reasons. I hope that our developer or whoever would be setting policy at the building wouldn't include a weight limit for our four-legged friends. Something that this I believe I'm the only current renter on council, and it's something that I've come up against time and time again, that there are weight restrictions for whatever reason. And so if there are abatements and tax incentives, and we have an opportunity as a council to break down those barriers and allow for families to stay together, including the four-legged members of their families, I'd be very appreciative of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily, and then Jennifer.
Thank you very much. I have a whole lot of mixed feelings about this, which makes things complicated. I was the counselor on the evaluation team. It's the first time I've evaluated a project, and there was only one, so it was hard to put numbers on it in that void. But it has a lot of things that I want. I've been very interested in mixed income housing. I think everybody should be living downtown, not just lower income and not just market rate. Downtown should be for everyone. I don't want lower income people to have to drive in from Veneta for their low income jobs downtown. Downtown revitalization. I mean, housing and downtown are two of my biggest topics. And to get downtown less crime, better business, we need more people. And we need people of all incomes. If it's just lower income, we won't have businesses that survive. And if we don't have businesses that survive, people will leave. And then there goes the property taxes that we can use to incentivize lower income housing. So I think it's important to be inclusive of everyone. Yes, if it gets them up to you, eventually we'll get the bigger taxes, but I'm living right now. I hear that young professionals and seniors would like to live in smaller housing units by the bus. I think that's very understandable. I also think that missing middle housing originally and still refers to missing middle sizes in between a house and apartment building. And it doesn't really pay attention to the missing middle of 60% to 80% AMI. Now, 60% to 80% AMI is not especially poor. I wish I made $39,000 a year. It would change my life. So I think we're fooling ourselves if we say this is for low income people. It's for middle income people and people who can pay market rate. So the 60% people that live here will still be rent burdened. We're subsidizing middle income and market rate with property taxes that come from all levels of income. The surveys and the letters that we got, not so surprising. The developers and the landowners and the people with money are very much in favor of this. And the people who are concerned about low income and affordable income housing don't like it. We are giving public land with public money to private developers. It's a prime location. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I think we should wait.
Hey, thank you. Jennifer and then Alan.
Mayor, so first off, thanks for this presentation. I also found it very easy to understand for a very complex project. I wanted to especially thank you guys for the map that showed the diverse, I'm going to use ecosystem of apartments in our downtown that provided different levels of cost for rent. That was a really great way to really understand how we have different options available throughout our downtown and where this project fits into that larger system that we're trying to provide for folks. I found that very helpful. I especially like that this project is working with two very special nonprofits in our community, Cornerstone Community Housing and Women's Space. I think it's fantastic that they've partnered with these two groups, especially Women's Space. I'm just really excited about that particular feature of this proposal. Claire brought up the $2 million gap. That is something I wanted to ask as well. Are they, when they say that they have a $2 million gap, are they already assuming that they're getting the MUPTI, or could that fill some of that gap?
That assumes that they're getting the MUPTI. Their pro forma included that.
Okay, so if they didn't, then they'd be even further away from being able to provide the rents that we preferred.
Correct.
Okay. So if we went ahead and moved on to the next step today, would there still be an opportunity to see if there is a way to provide that $2 million gap to get to those rents that, or do we need to have that, would that need to happen now before moving on?
I think if you wanted to provide us direction to begin exclusive negotiations, we could do that. And also if you directed us to look for other ways to add in that $2 million gap, we could kind of do those concurrently. I don't know what options there are for other funding mechanisms.
Right, I didn't know either, but it seems like it was important to us at the time when we created it. So if there is an option out there, I mean, I'd bring it up if I knew. I don't, but I'm hoping that there's something that I don't know about that could help us get to that level that we really want. I appreciate that answer. That is all I had.
Okay, thank you. Alan and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation. Kudos, it was very clear, answered most of my questions. We definitely need downtown housing. We definitely need affordable housing units, little a, little h. And we're definitely trying to build 20-minute neighborhoods. Nice to get the Washington Post. I hadn't seen that. That's great. I think it's fantastic that 51% of the units will be at 80% AMI. That's 66 units downtown, 63 at be at market rate. I understand the folks that said it's not affordable enough, but we didn't ask for 60% AMI. We asked for 80% AMI. So this is responsive in that regard. We do need more affordable housing units, big H, and other kind of affordable housing units. This is a great start. I'm really excited about the other 4 projects and the 400 other units at 60% AMI. That's fantastic. So 129 units downtown is great. I like it that we're working with Cornerstone and local nonprofit for doing this. I like that 10 units are local Women's Space nonprofit. They do amazing work. I like that there's 35 years of affordability. I like that it has a LEED certification, which to me is energy and environmental sustainability. I like that it's pet friendly. The incubator space is very creative and thoughtful. I like that there'd be a public gallery. I wouldn't, I think the design is kind of uninspired. Not excited at all about that. But I do like the fact that we're using the dollars from the Gordon Loft MUPI application. That's exactly what we were planning on doing when we set that fund up, exactly how this is supposed to work. I really like that we're working with a local developer. That means local jobs. And I think that our $1.1 million public investment is leveraging a $30 million private investment is exactly what we're trying to do in the projects like this. So overall, I support the proposal. Is it perfect? No. Would any project be perfect? Probably not, because everybody has their own opinion about it. But it's a darn good proposal in my book. And it's very responsive to the RFP that we put out for mixed income housing. And it has a lot of other public benefits that I think make this a really good project. So I'm very supportive of it moving forward.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Ann and Amanda for the presentation. Very well done, very clear and concise, and a lot of hard work behind it. So thank you for that. I would ask, most people aren't familiar with this sort of thing, and I'm just at a very high level. Could you review what your RFP process looked like in both, time and how that works when you an RFP for a project like this, just at a very high level?
Yeah, so it's a pretty standard process we've done in the past few years. This RFP was open for 3 months, which is a bit longer than we normally do. It was over the holidays. We sent it to about 100 different stakeholders and groups that are in the affordable housing realm and the regular development realm. We received coverage in several different media outlets. So I think KVAL, who else? KVAL, KLCC, and the Register Guard. We advertise it through social media. And we, I don't know, I guess if you have other questions, that's kind of the basics of it.
We had some criteria we were in public benefits that we were trying to get to with this. But we don't keep people from applying in any way that want to apply and want to fill out an RFP, do we?
Right. No. So we have kind of two levels. We have the very basics of what a project needs to have. So that's that mixed income housing, the affordability period. They have to show us that they can work with the federal regulations. And then we have the criteria which they're evaluated on. Some is like they have to meet it. They have to have certain elements. And then some that are just kind of bonus. If there were multiple proposals, right, the ones who scored higher would have more of those elements.
And the reason I'm asking these kind of basic questions is because I've read quite a lot of emails from people in our community who say, well, you guys should do this with that property, or you guys should build that with this property, or the other thing. And I would say we conducted a fair and public and thorough RFP process that was open for months, and anybody who thought they had a better idea about what it is we ought to do with this property was fully free to organize and submit an RFP. And it was open for a very long period of time. So I guess I would speak to those from whom I have received emails that say we should do something different with this space. I appreciate your communication, but we left it open to the public for quite a long time in quite an open fashion for them to organize and submit an RFP. And this is what we got as a response. And I think we're making good decisions and wise decisions about how to see our goals fulfilled and getting more housing downtown based on the responses that we got. And I'm in favor. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Claire, it looks like you need a second round.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to make some comments a little bit along the lines of what Councilor Clark was just saying. I also wanted to ask, so another piece of this that I think hasn't gotten enough attention is the utility credit. And Amanda, could you explain what that is?
Yes, in fact, I made a slide to help explain what that is. 1 second. So as we mentioned, the threshold of affordability is that households should spend no more than 30% of their income on housing costs, which includes rent and utilities. So utility allowances are a standard calculation that are used in affordable housing process to ensure that gross rents account for those utility costs. The utility allowances are required to be published annually by the local public housing authority, which for us is Homes for Good Housing Agency. They publish utility rates for each type of utility or service that would be provided in the housing. This is what that chart looks like. No need to be able to read it. Just wanted to show you what it looks like. And so, for example, electric heating, electric cooking, electric water heating, water and sewer all have different rates depending on unit size or number of bedrooms. And the sum of each utility provided would be the utility allowance. They're published for different utility agencies, so there'd be different rates for Springfield Utility Board versus eWeb. And we approve utility allowance calculations each year during monitoring. So this shows what the utility allowances are for the Montgomery proposal and how it impacts the rent. So the maximum housing cost for an 80% AMI one-person household, which would be a studio, is $980. The utility allowance for the studio is $86. And so the rent is the maximum rent is calculated by taking that maximum housing cost and reducing it by $86 to get a net rent of $894 per month. And this assumes the tenant pays for heating, lighting, cooking, and hot water, all of which will be electric, and for trash removal, and the owner pays water and sewer.
Great, thank you. And so in the charts that you've provided us, the market rate units, those are just the market rate rents that are being proposed, and they would be responsible for paying their own utilities.
Correct.
The listing for the income qualified units includes that utility, which would change calculations, and then it would be subtracted from the rent as the calculation changed.
Yeah, and that gets updated every year, just like the income limits get updated every year.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I also wanted to speak to this idea. Well, first of all, nobody I think on this council ever said that this was a low income housing proposal. It was always from the beginning envisioned as a kind of middle to lower income housing, but not low income housing in the sense of the affordable housing projects that St. Vincent de Paul and Homes for Good typically build. We were trying to calibrate to a section of the market that does not benefit from public subsidies, generally speaking, and because of their income and because of the way HUD works. So we had an opportunity to provide some income supported qualified housing that we wouldn't otherwise have. And there seems to be a concern out in the public that if we allow this development to go forward, we are not building a publicly funded shelter. We are not building additional supportive housing. Like it's a either or. We either don't do this and do those, or we do this and don't do those. And that's not the situation at all. Actually, by building this in this way, whether it's this project or some other response to our RFP, frees us up to continue to use those HUD funds that we can't use for folks in that $39,000 a year range who struggle to find housing. So we'll have our tax credit program available for affordable housing projects, which we are working to build with our partners. So I think that's really important. And I'm confused by Councilor Simple saying that the other half of the people in the building will be rent burdened. We don't know that. They may earn way more than the folks who are in the income qualified units. They will be market rate. So I had one more question. I'll just throw it in real quick. If we were to find a way to make up the $2 million difference, I would still want us to keep that 35-year timeline for the income qualified units. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. I was not saying that the market rate would be rent burdened. I'm saying anybody who got in there with 60% in an 80% apartment would be rent burdened. So I don't want that to be confused. I really like this project. I don't like using public money to give to people who have a lot of money. The Midtown and the Ferry Street buildings are being built without any subsidy. I know they don't have the lower income, but that's just really a disconnect for me. If we could find another 2 million and lower the rents, that would help a lot. But I don't want the 2 million to come from the city. You know, that would make our subsidy even more. And I'm concerned about how much we're giving away with the free land. I know it doesn't worth until you get the building going, but just like the steam plant, which is on the river in the middle of riverfront, this is in the middle of downtown. And I want as much or more than anybody to get downtown better. I don't like the architecture. I think that if we're going to do this, we need to build a building that won't get torn down in 50 years. And that's a concern. A lot of money. It's kind of a plain looking building. So that's a problem for me. I'd like to see us postpone, even if we come back to this project. And Greg's not here. So I would wish I did not have to vote on this today. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to sort of wrap up and, confirm where we are, but I did want to say a couple of things. And first of all, I agree with my colleagues who think this is a very strong proposal. I think it's important to remember that each housing project meets a specific part of the housing need in the community. No single project meets all of the needs. And this is a unique opportunity. And to remember that this project partners with Cornerstone and Women's Space, and presumably they know their base. They know the population that they're going to work with who will benefit from this housing and who want this housing. And so, I think they are trusted partners in our community in terms of helping us meet our housing need. And that, to me, is a very important component of this project. I am sorry that Greg is not here, but I don't see any particular reason to postpone. This work session was already postponed by a month. And so I would like to have Jennifer put a motion on the table.
Sure. I move to direct the city manager to A, enter into exclusive negotiations with the DeChase, Micus, Edlin and Company development team for the disposition and redevelopment of 1059 Willamette, and B, return to council with the proposed terms for action.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 1. And that passes 6-1. Thank you all very much. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I look forward to hearing the next step in this project.
Mayor?
Yes.
Before we move on, I'd like to make a motion regarding the filling the gap. Okay. I move to ask the city manager to bring back to council options for filling the proposed $2 million gap in this project in order to set the rents at the HUD fair market housing value.
Second.
Discussion, Alan?
Are you stipulating any source of that funds? Is that general fund money, or is it where do you think we're going to get $2 million?
I'm asking the city manager to bring us back options.
Good luck, Sarah.
Mike, comment, question, and then Emily, Katya.
I along the lines of thinking that Alan made here after Comcast, after everything we've seen budgetarily, I would really think that those options would not include general fund money and any sort of facility reserve or other sorts of options. And I was debating the idea of adding a friendly to that, but I don't want to complicate this too much. I think the manager hearing that may have been enough. So thank you.
Well, I just want to clarify, because if you pass a motion that says bring back options, I'm going to bring you back options that will include, maybe options that I wouldn't recommend, but I wouldn't just arbitrarily decide. So you would see general fund options in there. You don't have to vote for those.
Right. Forgive me for the carelessness of my words. Of course, you would do a thorough job. I would think that it may not have support to use general fund amongst the counselors, but of course you would. Thank you.
Claire, another comment?
Oh, I think Councilor Simple before.
Oh, Emily.
Thank you. Would these suggestions also include non-public funds? Because I think that I like the project, even though I voted against it right now. I would just have a hard time doubling our subsidy of this. So is there any possibility of outside funding also being found?
We can definitely explore that.
Okay, Claire, another comment?
Yeah, so I think like the city manager said, I feel like I would like us to see the array of options, including general fund, which, I don't think I would support that either. But I think if we're going to look at options, we should see them, right? And we don't have to consider the ones we don't like. But I think it's better for us to see what the array is. In terms of funds we don't control, I don't know how we do that unless, we work with the developer to apply for a grant from, the Murdoch Foundation or something, which I suppose isn't out of the question. But so I was thinking about funds that are within the purview of the city council to grant. But if the city manager has some ideas on non-city funding, that's I'm totally open to having those brought back as well.
Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for the maker of the motion. Councilor Syrett, do you think that this motion could benefit from specificity around the year of fair market housing? The HUD fair market housing, we used the 2020 fair market housing rent for the RFP, which had $773 at a studio, $893 for one bedroom. The proposal that came back to us had a studio at $894 and $956 at a one bedroom. I think it's implied that you mean that we're directing city manager to come back to us with those 2020 figures. But I wonder if that specificity is needed in the budget or in the motion.
Well, I'm referring to the figures that were offered by staff in their presentation today. So
the fair market rents get adjusted every year, similar to the income limit. So whatever the rents are at the time a tenant moves in is what would be used.
And according to staff, the developers had said in order to do the HUD fair market value, that would increase their gap for financing by $2 million.
Correct.
So we don't need the specificity to cite a certain year because it adjusts every year.
Correct.
Okay. So the housing adjusts every year, but unfortunately, wages don't adjust. Hence why we're in this problem. If I could just editorialize for a second there.
It'd be a one-time $2 million.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, Alan, one more comment?
Yeah, I think this motion's okay, in part because I don't think it's result in anything.
You're muted.
You muted by accident.
I think this is okay because I don't think it's actually going to result in anything. I think it's good because it'll be a good education process for council and for the public the reason there's a $2 million gap is because there's not very many, if any, options other than a public subsidy to get there. So, and with our general fund deficit looming in the millions, going there just makes zero sense to me. I'm okay with, having that be there. We could just go, thanks for that information. I don't have any intention of adding to the or digging the hole deeper when we've already got a pretty big hole that we need to dig out of by adding more debt or more subsidy here to make our general fund picture worse. So I'll be curious what come up with on as options. I think it's going to be a short memo.
Okay, are we ready to vote on this motion? All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you. That passes 7-0. Thank you very much for putting that forward. Great conversation. Look forward to the next chapter. And with that, we are ready to move on to our second item on the agenda, and I will turn it back to the manager.
Thanks, Mayor. The second item on your agenda is really to kind of finalize your conversation around vision, values, goals, and some updates to your operating agreements. I do think we have time on the 14th if you want to wait and vote on it on the 14th because Councilor Evans isn't here. That's not necessary, but we have tried to make sure that all of the councilors have a chance to vote on it. But I was just going to walk you through it. We're not going to wordsmith today unless there's something that's really burning and bothering somebody. You'd like the words just really have to change. But I just wanted to walk you through a couple of the last minute sort of adjustments so that everybody is clear what's there. I did email it to you, but I just want to make sure we do this right. All right. So as you know, we've been working on this since we started kind of generally talking about it in the fall, but really picked it up as we brought on Councilor Groves and Councilor Keating, and just revisiting these vision, values, and goals that we haven't really updated since 2009, 2010. So it's a good time to do it. This incorporates all of the changes that you've talked about so far, and includes just one word change that I highlighted here, which was changing the, I'm trying to remember which the word was. It went from thriving. Oh, so it said vibrant downtown, and vibrant was repeated in numbers of places. And it was pointed out that thriving might be a more appropriate word. And so I thought it met the same intent. And since it was offered by the councilor who downtown's ward is in their ward, I adjusted that. So you see, we're starting off where we are all Eugene. There may be some small typos still in here, a little bit of commas and periods and things like that. We'll adjust those as we go along, and the motion will allow for that. But that's kind of your final deal. I'm not going to read it through. I'm just letting you take a look at it. Does anybody, I'm just going to check. I'm going to keep moving unless sort of a hand goes up and somebody says, actually, I want to talk about this more. We'll just get to the end of them. So then we get to the goals and outcomes. First one, safe community for community well-being. It's been safe community for a really long time. I put the community well-being in there as an option of maybe you want to call it that based on all the feedback and survey information you received through the ad hoc process and the CSI. And I've heard a number of you talking about it. There was a recommendation that if we put it up there, that it would be safe community for community well-being and not confuse what we're talking about with safe community. So I also want to point out here that these are in the gray, the outcomes that were here before that were really specific to police are still kind of grayed out. And I think of it as being those apps on your phone when they're kind of wiggling. They're not really set yet. And I think you may want to revisit this in the fall as you're working through the ad hoc work to determine if you want to add something here or adjust one of those. But I'm leaving them there just to acknowledge you haven't really adjusted them yet, and they're still kind of out there. Sustainable and accountable development, nothing really changed here other than making some things, transit corridors, plural, All very similar wording as you've already had a chance to adjust. We'll get into these next ones. So accessible, thriving culture, parks and recreation, exactly the same as I think the last time you saw it. And then when we jump into the next one, the equitable, effective, accountable municipal government, this first sentence was a long one. So it used to end, instead of saying effective and efficient services to achieve measurable and positive outcomes, period, it said for the community at the end. And there was a recommendation that you could just stop it at outcomes, and that would be a stronger statement. So that's why that's the way it is. So those two highlighted items are really the only things that are really different. And then fair, stable, and adequate financial resources has pretty much stayed the same in terms of the outcomes you're looking for, but did make an emphasis on being innovative. So those are all of the changes that I think are ready for you to adopt when you're ready to do that. And there's a motion to do that, and I have a motion to do that. So I just want to open it up for any conversation about that before we switch over to operating agreements. If there needs to be any. Otherwise, I will just move on and you'll finish your meeting early. It'll be great. That's one of your goals. Councillor Clark.
Two things. One, I do hope we bring this back and vote when Greg is here. This needs all councillors to vote one way or another, in my opinion. The other one is I'm willing to vote for this, and I did not participate in too much editing as I did that a few years back. But there are parts of this that strike me as good goals and things that are in fact values for me. I just don't think we work very hard to accomplish them. And in terms of people's points of view and including all of them in the conversation. I'm trying to use the best language I can with this. I wonder what's next after we adopt this, which I suspect we will. Can you talk a little bit, Sarah, about how this will frame your work and how you direct staff and how you suggest we conduct meetings and other implications of this work?
Well, I think one of the things that came up pretty strongly and consistently in the last workshop was you're looking for ways to kind of measure and report back on this work. So this will create, I don't know exactly how that plays out, but we've been talking about this, creating a foundation of things that we might just report more specifically on. There is a piece in the operating agreements adjustments that points directly to work session polls and using some of the language in here there, and I'll talk about that next. But then I think also, you know, for us, and I will say that at a staff level, you know, it's not that, you know, one of the things that we've always talked about with these is at a staff level, it doesn't mean the things that aren't listed on here aren't important. What it really means is that right now, based on the things that you're hearing and the things that you're experiencing, these are some areas that you really want to see some focus, and you specifically want to communicate with the community about what you're doing. So, you know, we'll go through this and think about the ways in which we implement this. And, you know, there's a number of things we're already implementing that are going to achieve some of these outcomes. But I think what you'll see from us is we'll start to line up, here are some possibilities. And as we're bringing things to council, we're going to say, this will implement this thing. And I'll start to track, you know, what are we not getting done? Where are the things that, you know, where are the gaps? What are we missing? The piece that I think you're expressing, some of what I'm hearing you talk about is really around how you operate, or at least I've heard you talk about this. That one is an interesting nuance of just how you work with each other, how you treat each other, how you respect each other, all of that. Some of that comes through in the operating agreement. Some of that comes through with how you kind of self-manage during these meetings. And I'm not exactly sure. I can help lead that and I can point that out individually, but I probably wouldn't
Right.
jump in a moment.
I said this during a neighborhood association meeting last night that Councilor Ye and I were both a part of, that I believe this council right now operates more civilly towards one another than councils have in a very long time. I'm old enough at this to remember times when council meetings were a great deal more abrasive and a great deal more, conflict oriented than they are now. But at the same time, what I'm referring to is members of the community. There are often times we deal with controversial issues where a part of the community may have strong feelings about a solution in one way, and a other part of the community may have strong feelings about the solutions in another direction. I still hear every day, all the time, about, just to take one specific example, about how the majority of our council chooses to deal with homelessness in our community. There is a very large section of my ward and others, I suspect, who think we should deal with that differently. And when they came to council to voice that opinion, they were quite literally shouted down. And nobody feels that safe to come back and speak about how they really feel and what they think, because we didn't do anything to stop the people who were shouting them down. And for me, I agree with these values, and I agree that these are wonderful goals that we should do. I would really like us to actually do more to see them accomplished, so that everybody can feel at least heard when we get back to meeting in real life and in person again. So I've said my piece on it now, and I'll be happy to support this as it goes, but I needed to say that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to hop back over to the second part of this, which is really around a few excerpts from your operating agreements. So in this one, and this is sort of gets into the how do you implement it, this starts to get there. So in this one, this hasn't changed from your previous meeting. The things that are in red are things that you've been piloting for a while. And the things that are in green are recommended changes to implement some of what I've heard you say you'd like to do. So for example, the public forum, you have expressed a desire when there are things that are meeting your sort of priority goals around like housing and homelessness, some of the things that we've been putting on consent around affordable housing or low income rental property tax exemptions, you've been consistently pulling them. And so this would actually put that into your agreements, that's something that we do the committee reports, the items of interest, the priority goal consent actions before we go into consent calendar 1. That way there's just always an expectation that staff need to be prepared to give a 30-second overview, or that you can. So that's what that is. As you scroll down here, the public hearings night. So this is where we talked about a desire to have more opportunities for your standing advisory bodies to the council to have more opportunities for them to be able to speak to you. So when we talked about this before, one of the recommendations was, well, maybe on the public hearings night, that could also be a night that they come, and that might just be a regular thing. What this doesn't lock that in, but it does make it a possibility. So what I heard in particular was a desire to hear more from your standing bodies. That could happen during any of your normal work sessions, doesn't have to happen here, but what this does is it allows it to happen here. So if you did have a light public hearing night, or you didn't have things scheduled, we could schedule those in here. So that's what this one does. And then really simply on the council poll, that we would shift the council poll to include piece where you talk about what is the council goal or priority issue in question. It doesn't mean that you can't pull for something that isn't in it, but it is intended to help us all be thinking about what are the goals and outcomes we're really trying to move forward with this item. Let's see. Oh yeah, and this is the action item. So this very much relates to what I said earlier in terms of items that and the direction at which they come through. So those are the only, your operating agreements have a lot of different sections. These are the only sections that we've amended at this time. And so the motion that I gave to Councilor Ye and that I have here, and I'm just going to share them with you. And I know we're not going to do these today. But the first one would be, you would be moving to adopt your final draft vision and goals as presented during this work session and allowing for minor edits to finalize the documents because we know they're in there. And then the second one could be that you're approving those changes to those sections and that you're directing me to bring it back on an upcoming consent agenda because your operating agreements are put in place through resolution. So that's, I'm going to stop sharing unless I'll stop sharing, and if there's a question, I can always bring them back up. All of that we could do on the 14th. And it'll be very brief unless Councilor Evans has more to say, but I just wanted to check in and make sure if there's any last comments or questions. Councilor Keating.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Maderi. To Councilor Clark's inquiry, Councilor Clark's inquiry inspired me to pull out something that sits right here at my desk from Lane Community College. The LCC vision, mission, strategic directions, and equity lens work is all laminated and sits right here. And it was the college that did that. And I'm happy to do that in my own dime with whatever we end up voting on the 14th. But I think the city memorializing it and allowing us to put that at our workstations, it's been a guiding light for me through my work at LCC. And I think that would be a helpful tool to have at our disposal. The second thing is looking at the operating agreement. I've been hearing from constituents who have longed to participate in public forum, but get on too late, and the 5-minute window from when the meeting starts may not necessarily allow for maximum participation. And a lot of the criticism has come that we get a lot of the usual suspects, and I'm not condemning anyone for continuing to come to voice their opinion at council. I appreciate public testimony at our public hearings. But if we were to consider expanding the time limit by which folks sign up, the 5-minute to 10-minute, I think we could get a more diverse cross-section of our community participating, A. And B, are those, this is an inquiry, are those who do sign up generated randomly, or do they participate in public forum in the order that they sign up?
Great question, Councilor Keating. The council prior to being in this virtual pandemic environment had voted to do a pilot of randomizing that. So when people come and sign up, we randomize that. It's harder to do that on Zoom. And we've been doing people more in the order because it's more randomized anyway because people, it's just how people are coming in. So we could still randomize it. We just haven't been doing it in the same way. But yes, that's intended to be an ongoing practice.
Could I clarify on the timing issue, Councilor Keating?
Yeah, please.
So currently the sign up window for folks is actually 7:15 to 7:35 in our online forum. So it actually is a little bit longer. It starts earlier than the actual meeting time to allow more folks to sign up.
Okay, got it. I don't know if that necessarily tracks with what was in the operating agreement, though. I think in the operating agreement, it says 5 minutes since the start of the meeting. So I appreciate the time prior to the meeting. I would still long for an extension beyond that, the start time. And so, if we're starting at 7:15 and that's working and folks are used to that, that's great. But for folks who may want to participate and provide testimony for the first time, if that's extended from 7:35 to 7:40, I think that'd be sufficient. We don't have to come to a consensus or come to a decision today. I want to throw it out there as for council's consideration. Should we revisit this, which I suspect we will on the 14th? Thanks, Brooke. I appreciate the clarification though about and the intention to allow folks to sign up earlier. Appreciate that.
I am not sure who is next, Mayor. Have you been tracking this? Emily?
I'm muted. Alan is next.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. On the operating agreements, for the order of things, I appreciate the adding priority goal consent actions. I'm wondering, we're often put in the place where we're doing people's business on important priority goals actions at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which seems very inappropriate to me. Seems like dead of the night kind of things. And I'm wondering if that word consent should be deleted. And we should be working on priority goal actions before the forum, because we need to get the public business. If people want to inform the priority goal that we're going to take, there's a forum right before a meeting before that can address that. So I don't particularly think that too much of what we get out of the forum actually informs the actions that take place after it, except for annexations and anything like that, which is why we put them in consent calendar too. So I'd be in favor, or I know we're not doing this now, but deleting the word consent and having priority goal actions before the forum. I also think that I still think the forum's too long. It's getting in the way of getting business done. I think it still should be 60 minutes. I've said that many times. I like the shuffling, but the forum is supposed to inform us about topics and things that people want to hear. Well, as Matt said, we're hearing the same people say the same thing over and over again, and it's not informing the council. It's nice. Some people think it's their job to come to the council and say the same thing 10 times. So I think maybe we should discuss those people that were at the last two meetings would be moved to the end of the list, and then we reshuffle it. So we get new voices at the beginning of the meeting. Have those people be there. If there's time available, then the people who have said their thing 5 times to us in a row can say that again. I'm not trying to call people's right to speak. I'm just trying to make what we do efficient and effective in terms of getting us more information. So by moving the people that are new to the forum up to the beginning of the line, and that can be randomized, that makes a lot more sense to me. And then finally, the part about deleting the consent action items, I guess, would relate to the 3.06, the action items, which I think we should do more than just the consent items in before the forum. Thanks.
I think you're up, Councilor Simple.
Thank you. I've complained about doing the goal actions after forum for years. And I think it's really important that we do these more controversial topics when it's not in the middle of the night. People need to hear that. I hate to put it right before forum because sometimes those topics go on for quite a while, and then people would have to wait instead of having a defined time. So I don't know what the solution is, but boy, I'd really like to do the things that take some talking before or some other meeting than the forum time. It's just exhausting to try to keep all that speechifying and decision-making after 2 meetings. I thought we used to start sign up for public comment at 7. Did that change to 7:15? I know at Harris Hall it was 7. So I would like it to be 7 since it was 7. And I'd be happy to go to 7:40 for signing up because I hear a bunch of complaining that they couldn't get on the list. I wouldn't want to be the person in charge of keeping track of who spoke at the last meeting or 2. That sounds really like a time user. But boy, I am also thinking that it's not very effective to have 10 people come every time and read exactly the same words, which they've already sent to us on many, many emails. I think it starts to work against you. And I think people should be aware of that. Ditto for the emails. If you've got 100 people who feel some way about something, sign a petition. I will read every single name on there. I read every single name on all the emails, but I have to open every single one, and the ones that are different get buried, and then I get unhappy. So if you want me to listen to what you have to say, I'd appreciate an original sentence. I don't need pages. And make petitions. I want to know what you think. But we have limited time and we get complaints that we don't answer emails. It's really hard and things get really buried. And I know that wasn't exactly on topic, but it's been on my mind. So there it is. Thank you.
Thanks. I have not gone to mayor training school, so I already lost track of who's next. So I'm going to go Councilor Groves, Councilor Clark, and then Councilor Siret.
I think Councilor Clark was next, but mine's short. I just wanted to say I agree completely with what Councilor Zelenka said. Emphasis added. You know, I like people to exercise their voice, but I too have heard from a number of constituents who can't seem to break into the queue. Yet we hear from the same people saying the same thing week after week. And I think I like the idea of moving them further back in the queue to give new voices a chance to be heard. I think that's part of our responsibility. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Clark and then Siret.
I want to echo exactly what Councilor Groves, Zelenka, and Temple just said about the repetitive nature of some of the testimony we hear. I too would far prefer to move action items up front, and not just because of the hour that we're doing the public's business and actually making decisions. While I agree with Emily, that shouldn't be done in the dead of the night. That should be up front where it's easy for everybody to see. But also when we make staff members, especially during in-person meetings, when we make staff members stay and be a part of the public forum just so that they're available to us for questions during action items, we're paying them. So we're paying X number of staff people an extra hour and a half to sit there and listen until we may need them. And I think that's inefficient and we're wasting money. We shouldn't. There's another reason to move action items front. I suggested when we first, prior to Zoom meetings, when we first made some changes to how we do public forum, that databases are simple, and that was not simple, that's simple. And the databases are quite simple to operate, and you put a person's name in and you put a date along the top row and their names along the left row, and you can pretty much see who has signed up to speak on what date. And I would propose that we offer people the opportunity to speak 8 times in a year. And after that, they move to the back of the line. And we're not saying they can't speak. We're just saying if we don't have enough time, those are the ones, that we're going to hear from last. So if they've already spoken 8 times during the course of the year, that's almost once a month during the months that we meet. And I think it's fair and it gives new voices a chance to be heard more effectively. Thank you.
Hi, all. I am just going to jump in here for a minute. I know Claire has one more comment, and I'm leaving the city manager in charge. I have a meeting that I have to zoom into on time at 1:30, and so you can run over. I'm going to have to bow out. So thank you for this discussion, and thank you, Sarah, for keeping it going.
I haven't been to mayor school. All right, we have one more minute, Councilor Siret.
Yeah, technically it falls to Councilor Ye to run the meeting. Yep. So this might be a little out of order, Councilor Ye, but in reference to the types of public comment we might receive and what's effective in terms of, is it a form email that everybody sent us or something else? I meant to mention this in our 1059 Willamette conversation. We got a lot of identical emails from people objecting to the project on certain grounds. And then we got over a dozen of individually crafted letters of support coming from people who had a theme, but each letter was individually written, and I read all of them and really appreciated the time people took to put their thoughts on that important topic into their own personal perspective of why they particularly supported it. So I just wanted to call that out. Thank you.
All right, so we'll be back on this same topic on Monday. It sounds like the vision, values, goals piece is pretty solid, and you may want to have a little bit more conversation about the process items. So I look forward to that. That's all I have. And actually, Councilor Ye, it's yours to finish.
Thank you. I feel so special. So as long as no one else has anything to say, we are adjourned. We'll see everyone later.